South Africa's problems are many and they're serious. I mean, from rolling blackouts to the soaring costs of living, poor service delivery, failing SOEs and unemployment, we find ourselves in a worse position than we were 20 years ago. In a word, we are regressing. And tomorrow's State of the Nation address needs to talk to these critical issues with more than just rousing words. We need concrete action plans and a realistic look at where we are as a country. These sentiments in a Daily Maverick op-ed penned by Songezo Zibi, author and chairperson of the Rivonia Circle. Now, he joins me now to unpack his article even further. Songezo, thank you so much for your time and good evening to you. I read the article and just want to share with those who haven't perhaps laid their eyes on it. The first part that I think struck me as a citizen, as a South African, as a woman and a professional in this country is this paragraph. You say, and I quote, "Thursday's State of the Nation address should not be an ordinary one. While rolling blackouts are the most pressing national issues, the truth is that our crisis now runs deep and far deeper than rolling blackouts. We are going backwards, erasing the progress we have made since 1994. Songezo, in your view, I mean, how deepened is the regress? I mean, how backwards have we gone and erased that progress that we thought we have made since 1994?
So we've gone as far back as 20 years, in some instances more. And I'll make a couple of examples to help the viewers. Unemployment now at 33% is the same as it was 20 years ago. In 2007, 2008, unemployment was still high at 21.3%, but it is now 33%. When you take account of those who have given up looking for work, it's at 44%. Youth unemployment, 60%. Eskom is producing as much electricity as it did more than 30 years ago. 30 years ago, that's how much electricity Eskom is producing. So those are just two of those, but the really big one is that the government over the last 15 years has run out of money. So when the ANC came to power in 1994, South Africa was hugely indebted. The ANC, especially under President Mandela and President Thabo Mbeki, erased much of that debt. Today, this year, the Treasury expects that we will pay 335 billion rand per year servicing debt, the biggest single item on our budget. So we spend more servicing debt than we do on health, than we do on policing, than we do on basic education and so on. So we've gone backwards, in essence.
I feel like we are having a discussion of the state of our nation. I know that the country is expecting that address by the president tomorrow, but this is actually an eye-opener in the current state of South Africa. You also highlight the reality around children not even reaching matric. You've just spoke about, basic education being one of the sectors that definitely needs progress, but also take us through why is it that we're seeing that most children don't even make it past matric, most of them even dropping out?
8%, according to the Department of Basic Education, do not make it to matric. Now, it may be clear, these are not kids who eventually make it to matric. These are kids who never make it to matric. Now, we talk about job creation and unemployment and so on. The bulk of those young people who are unemployed, this is not to say people with matric and post-matric qualifications get jobs easily, but the bulk of the unemployed come from the 48% that don't make it because they don't have a skill. 7 million of them don't even have IDs because for most kids, the trigger for getting an ID is your matric exam. So if you don't do your matric, that trigger does not come. You can't find a job, you can't access basic services, you have no hope. So these are problems that we have to look at together and not talk about job creation separately, talk about education separately, talk about skills development separately. This is a very deep crisis, and what we need is a wartime type State of the Nation address, a crisis turnaround plan. Not business as usual.
Right. You've highlighted, children not making it to matric, most of them dropping out, that leading to joblessness, because if you don't have the matric certificate, you can't make it to institutions of higher learning. Employers are not trying to look at you. They're looking at those with higher qualifications. That leads to unemployment. How about the economic growth? Is that helping at all? While that's the current state in terms of unemployment, is our economy showing any progress at all?
Absolutely not. So 2 weeks ago, I think it was, the South African Reserve Bank, the Monetary Policy Committee thereof, gave its outlook of economic growth in South Africa. And they said they've revised their estimation from, I think, 1.3, 1.4% to 0.7% this year. They blamed two things. They blamed load shedding in the main. They blamed load shedding, and they also blamed what they called logistics constraints. Logistics constraints mean Transnet in the main. So Transnet has got problems. It's 108 billion rand in debt. It needs 111 billion to revitalize its infrastructure. Eskom is almost 400 billion rand in debt, and it spends more on servicing that debt than it does on maintenance. 19 billion for maintenance in 2021, 72 billion on debt. So the president must talk about our financial plan as a country, our fiscal plan, and not in a sort of regular run-of-the-mill way that we've done over the years, but the same kind of approach that we got in the mid-1990s.
Yeah, but Songezo, I mean, most interest groups have said that we not only need a plan, we need an implementable plan. Cyril Ramaphosa as a president has often been dubbed a president who makes promises that he doesn't keep. He almost paints a rosy, optimistic, picture during his State of the Nation address, and it's just that. It's optimism, it's planning, it's we will do this, it's tumamina, it's renewal. But what happens with, a plan of action, appointment plan, which is strategic, technical, implementable, and practical? In your view, what does that implementable strategy look like?
The first thing we have to accept is that, even the best coaches in the world, if they have, and is not one, if they have a really bad team, like the soccer team from my village, they're not going to win anything, right? And we must accept the inherent incapability of the African National Congress as a governing party these days to do that. Let me make an example. President Thabo Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki, complained about a social compact. A social compact needs a strong political center. In other words, you need a political vehicle, and the ANC has been that for a very long time, that different stakeholders trust that it is capable, it has credibility, it can be trusted, so that they can put their respective shoulders to the wheel to solve the problems of the country. So problem number one, that credibility is gone. The second thing is that the very orientation of the ANC towards where you find capital and how you deploy it into the economy is lacking. And since the state has no money, the really game in town is how do we find private capital and deploy it into the economy, specifically into private infrastructure. Otherwise, we're going to overborrow ourselves and rely on corporate machinistas to tell us what the national policy needs to be.
Yeah.
And we don't need to find ourselves in that position.
All right. Before I let you go as well, I'm sure South Africans are also wondering, should we expect personal income tax increases? I mean, surely South Africans cannot afford any more than what has been forced out of their pockets.
I don't think that's possible politically and practically. Remember, inflation is high, which means cost of living is high. It makes no sense to then penalize the same people who are suffering from a cost of living crisis with higher personal income taxes, because South Africans are struggling. They can't afford electricity, water, they're losing their jobs, and so on. So I don't expect it to. If they do, then it will spell trouble in many ways, many more ways than one.
I appreciate you speaking to me about this. Songezo Zibi, thank you for the true State of the Nation address. I think we've just painted a picture of how the country's looking, and hopefully the president tomorrow will officially take to the podium in the National Assembly, particularly at the Cape Town City Hall tomorrow, to provide some answers to the crisis that we find ourselves in South Africa. Songezo Zibi, author, chairperson of the Rivonia Circle, thank you so much for your time.